Okay, good morning. I think most of the people that is joining us have entered, so it's time for us to start this additions and extensions to sectional title schemes masterclass. This is a result of the Murphin project that we did, where we had the discussion with other professionals. And because there was not a lot of time for us to really go through the processes, we are this morning going through some of the processes. Still not a complete picture, obviously, but enough information for you to understand perhaps a bit more. We have a variety of specialists, I think, attending. So we'll be curious to know how many of the different professions we have, and we'll send out the poll soon. I'm going to share my screen, and then we can get going. Stop sharing. Let me just check. Am I shared at this stage or not? Am I sharing? Okay, so you have the slides in front of you. Okay, there's the poll. If you can just perhaps put your information in there, then we know exactly who we are talking to. And oh yeah, lots of managing agents at this stage, trustees, some owners, and yeah, quite a few property practitioners. So we have a wide variety, and we'll try to look at it from the different perspectives as well. Okay, let's just give a bit of background about myself. I'm ABRIE SNYMAN. I'm a town planner by trade. My company, Multiprof Property Intelligence, we specialize in town planning, architecture, sectional title. Then we also do a bit of valuations, property inspections. Personally, I'm passionate about connecting the dots between all the different professions in the property industry, and therefore we would like to give some info from the different perspectives. As far as our subject today is concerned, and dealing with these issues, it's really quite problematic, and a huge part of the problem is just the fact that people do not understand how complex these systems are. I always like to refer to the fact that a complex is not called a complex for nothing. It is complex. So let's look at a few of the areas that we need to be aware of when we deal with extensions to sectional title complexes. If I can just get... Okay, let's first just look at the typical extensions and additions that are made in complexes, and what we need to know when we look at these issues. Now, typically, it will include things like adding a room to a unit, building a carport, enclosing patios, and various similar type of things when the houses that's added. And obviously it's not possible in the short time that we have to discuss all of them, but the principles are quite the same. And I would like to ask you to perhaps, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat, and at the end we will discuss some of the questions, and hopefully we have all the answers for you. If we don't, we can always come back to you on it. It's often fairly difficult to advise on a specific situation without having all the information in front of us. We often get a question, can I enclose my patio? But we don't have all the information that we require, but then we can investigate. Okay, the first point that we need to understand is that there's different the legal status of the area where the addition or alterations are planned. And it can either be a part of the unit, it can be on common property, or it can be common property with exclusive use. And the way of going about it might be different, and therefore you need to understand that the addition, where it is going to happen. Most of the time, it is on common property, because as you would all know, in sectional title, you own the inside of your unit and you have an undivided share in the common property. So most additions will be done on common property, and therefore you need to follow certain procedures. Now let's first start at the documents that one really needs, and that is especially from the side of the managing agents and the trustees that will have some decision making or a role in the admin of these requests. And first, of course, you need a zoning certificate, because in the zoning certificate, it states certain aspects, including, and most pertinent in complexes, what we call coverage. And that will be the total area of roofed area. In the zoning certificate, it might state that certain things are excluded from coverage, for instance, garages or things, or carports. But if you don't have it in writing, then it doesn't exist. So you need proof to see how much coverage is allowed, what is the parking requirements, and then you need a copy of the site development plan. A site development plan is basically a plan indicating the whole complex. We look at the plan just now. Then you need the existing building plans of the unit that you, or the section that you are looking at to do additions or extensions to. And then, of course, you need the sectional title plans so that you can determine what is part of the unit, what is common property, and that will influence the process to some extent. A typical example of a zoning certificate, it will typically tell you what you can do and what you can't do, and it will have the information on floor space ratio, coverage, and the parking requirements. Without that, it is difficult to determine if alteration or addition can be allowed. Then the important one, the site development plan. When a new complex is developed, mostly it will have a zoning of residential 2, and before any building plans are approved by council, a site development plan is required. So a site development plan means a plan showing the siting, the elevations, the exterior finishes of the proposed buildings, parking areas, open space of the proposed development of a property, and any natural features, because in a complex, you have high density, you have people living close to each other, and what one unit do affects the rest. So whenever any application is made for any additions in a complex, obviously council want to see how it is going to affect the rest of the complex, including things like parking, privacy, lines of sight, the garden areas, to make sure that the quality of living in the complex are not negatively affected. So, and then of course you need the building plans. Now a building plan will typically have a plan number and it will have a stamp on it. So before you can really look at in a complex or in any sectional title, you need to know what have been approved before. You cannot assume that because a structure has been there for years, that it is a legal structure, and it's very difficult to look at additions without knowing what is legal at this stage. Okay, once you have all of those documentations available, then if a owner plan to make additions or alterations, firstly, you will need to get an architect or draft person to create a image of what it is that you want to do. You will have to be able to show the trustees and your co-owners the size, the visual impact it will have, and without that plan, it's very difficult to make decisions. It's obviously not a final plan as for submission to council, but it needs to have enough information on to make it possible for the co-owners to have an opinion on it. Then, of course, when this is done on common property, you need the permission of your co-owners. Let's say you want to add another room. That room will be on common property and all the co-owners have a say in the matter. Because you now want to utilize common property that belongs to all the co-owners for your, in most cases, you need 75% support. And for that, you will need to take this request to the AGM or a special general meeting whereby a decision can be made. Now, of course, the trustees, it's always, I think, a good idea to first discuss this with the trustees as well, and make sure that you have the support of as many people as possible. And once you have done that and you got the approval, a site development plan needs to be drafted and submitted indicating the changes. Because council will not look at a building plan if the site development plan is not first approved. In some cases, or in most cases, these two things can run simultaneously, but you will need to convince council as well that these improvements are to the benefit of the complex. At council, of course, they will look at this according the regulations in the town planning scheme and all the building regulations. It can in Tshwane take up to 4 months to get these plans approved, sometimes even longer. And with the submission of the plans, they will need an engineer. We will appoint at that stage a land surveyor when there's changes to the PQ, and any other consultants, including fire consultants, if you deal with LAPAs or Wendy's that can be fire hazards. So it's important to know that for all temporary and permanent structures, building plans are required. And it is also important to notice that this plan, once approved, is only valid for 12 months if a building inspector did not activate the plan. So before the building plan is approved, basically you cannot start the construction, and The same process obviously is followed for as-built stuff, and even more complicated, because now you don't have the luxury of asking the building inspector to do inspections while the construction is still happening. So once the plans have been submitted, and obviously these plans will have to be signed off by the trustees before you can submit it. After they got the approval from the body corporate, the plan examiner will scrutinize the building plans, and then it goes to the different departments. And there can be various departments that needs to sign off on this plan, and eventually the chief plan examiner will approve the building plan. Now at least you have approved a site development plan and the building plan, and now the construction can take place. So the addition, let's say the room is added, and only after that have been done, then the land surveyor can survey the additions and create new sectional title plans, including the additions. Now there is a 10%, once we, let's say again, once the increase of your section is more than 10% of the existing side, then you also need to get the approval from the bondholders of the other units. We'll get to that a bit later again. So the land surveyor will physically come and survey the additions. Let's say it was another room. He will add another 15 square meters to your sectional title plan. And then once that has been indicated on the sectional title plan, it will go to the Chief Surveyor General's office for evaluation and approval, and that typically can take about 6 weeks to do. Let's just have a look at sectional title plans. As you will all know, in sectional title, you are the owner of the inside of your unit, your section, and the rest is all common property. And the problem that we often find is that when a sectional title is bought or sold, the correct information is not transferred to the new owner. And therefore, often owners believe that they own the gardens, they own the lapa, they own the carport, and often that is legally not correct. Only when you can prove that it's either part of your section or that you at least have exclusive use over those areas, you can lay some kind of a claim on that. Otherwise, only what is on the sectional title plan, and only then mostly the inside of your unit, surveyed in the center of the outside walls. And therefore, if you compare the sectional title plan with your building plan, the sectional plan will always indicate a smaller area than your building plans would, purely because the outer layer, the outer brick does not form part of the area in the sectional title plan, while it will be a part of the building plan size. So be aware of that. So this is your typical sectional title plan. On one of the pages, you'll have the whole complex. This is the page. It normally consists of about 4 or 5 pages. And every time that the addition is done, this plan needs to be changed. This is your typical sectional title plan per section. And therefore, when the addition is done, the land surveyor will indicate a change to this plan, and only the last approved plan, sectional title plan, will indicate if you are the owner of that addition or not. If it's not indicated on the sectional title plan, technically even that addition, bedroom or whatever it is common property. The bank will not use it to add value when they do a valuation of it, and you cannot claim it as yours. So if you are a property practitioner, you cannot really even offer that to a buyer, because technically it is common property, and as bizarre as it sounds, anybody in the complex can use it if it's on common property. And then of course, additions will affect the levies, and that's where, especially for trustees that have a responsibility to ensure that levies are charged correctly, obviously with the managing agents as well, is that there is a responsibility to ensure that all additions that have been made in the past and that was not, where the plans was not rectified, is rectified as a matter of urgency to prevent the misallocation of participation quotas, and in that case, some owners will be paying parts of the levies of other owners. And a lot of these cases are going to cease us at this stage, where trustees have not done their duty and insisted that additions are registered to ensure that the PQs are correct and therefore the levies are correct. Let's just have a look here. Okay. We do most of our work in Tshwane, and therefore we're just going to have a look at this specific Section 28.9 application in Tshwane. It's often referred to as the SPLUMA certificate. That's not 100% correct, but I know we have people from all over the country, and in other areas, in places like Mpumalanga and some of the other areas, you need to supply a SPLUMA certificate indicating that the building plans and the sectional title plans are exactly what is on the ground. In Tshwane specifically, we have, according to the bylaw, a Section 28.9 application, whereby we need to submit to council all the information on the scheme, basically the sectional title diagrams, the zoning certificate, the approved site development plan, and the approved building plan. And council will only issue this certificate if all of that are in place, and therefore, and that's especially important for the property practitioners, when you list a property, make sure that all of those things are up to date, because if the bank or the buyer insists on having these documentation, the seller will have to go through this process, and in real life, it can take you up to 9 months to rectify additions that was done when the processes was not followed. On that point, I also want to again stress the point, especially to trustees, that whenever you receive a request for any additions or alterations, just saying yes or no is not the right way to go about it. If you want to support it, it's recommended that you use wording similar to we have in principle no objection to your request on condition that all town planning regulations, all national building regulations, and all sectional titles, rules and regulations are adhered to. That will send the message that the approval of the trustees are not the final approval. Unfortunately, and I can quite understand why often an owner will assume that the trustees' permission is the final answer. So they will not bother about building plans and sectional title plans. And that's why at this stage we have quite a lot of problems in complexes with illegal additions. That was done many years ago, some of them, and even well, most of them now have new owners. They bought it like that. They were never informed by the estate agent at that stage, now the property practitioner, that what they bought was not what they thought they bought. So yeah, it's just important to note, not for trustees not to give just permission saying yes, you can do it, and for property practitioners to make sure that you supply a buyer with copies of the documentation, explain to him how sectional title works, and explain to him what is part of his unit, what is exclusive use areas, and what is common property. Now, once the construction have been finalized and even the sectional title have been updated, that's not the end of the process. If it's a new addition, the building inspector must be asked to inspect the foundations, and he will issue an inspection request form, and he will then issue a certificate of work in progress. Now, once that has been done, you have the rest of your life to finish that addition from the building plan side. Obviously, from the trustee side and the body corporate, you want people to get people to finish what they start. You don't want half-finished projects. But if you don't, within the first 12 months, ask the building inspector to come and issue a work in progress, your building plan will lapse, and that building plan is of no value, and in future you'll have to resubmit that. To obtain a certificate of occupancy, and each and every unit in a complex should have a certificate of occupancy. The purpose of that, guaranteeing the safety of the owners and guaranteeing the safety of the complex. For that, you will need a plumbing certificate, you'll need a gas certificate if applicable, glazing indicating that enough or the right types of glazing have been used, an electrical certificate, and in a geotechnical report in areas where you have dolomite. And then there's also in different parts of the country some specialized reports or certificates that is required. So you can find out from your municipality or your building inspector what they will require to ensure that that they can issue a certificate of occupancy. That is about the final step that you would like to have to ensure that the structures in your complex is legal. Only when each and every unit have a certificate of occupancy, and that compares to the approved building plans and there's no additional structures, then you know you have a legal complex and you will not have any issues with insurance claims and stuff like that. We have discussed the last time the dangers of not having a compliant complex. Basically, as I said, this is, you require that. And then obviously, once the certificate, once the land surveyor have approved his a plan, then you need to appoint a conveyancing attorney for the registration of the amended sectional title scheme with the deeds office and the endorsement of the title deed. So that will change the size of your unit on your title deed, and that will be the official size of your unit from then on. Now, I just wanted, this is an example of a certificate of occupancy, and you will note that there's a plan number, and that plan number will correspond to the number on the building plan. And just a word of warning to trustees, and especially when more than one unit or a few units have made additions, and all of them get together and want to fix all of the additions at once. Sometimes you will get a draftsperson or even an architect that will suggest that you do it all on one plan, purely because there's some savings in it, but it will prove to be penny-wise, pound-foolish, because only one certificate of occupancy can be issued per plan number. So let's say you put 10 units on one plan, you need to get all 10 units to being compliant before one certificate of occupancy can be issued to all 10 of those units. Now, in real life, that is impossible, and therefore it is important, even if the plans are done at the same time, to have different plans for each unit submitted, so that each unit can get the certificate of occupancy as soon as they are ready. When complexes are built, and that is later on proved to be complicated, there will only be one certificate of occupancy being issued for the whole complex. It's often supposed to be kept at council with the building plans, but as you will know by now, councils have no legal obligation to keep copies of site development plan, building plans, or certificate of occupancies. It is the responsibility of the owner of a unit, and obviously for the complex itself, things like the site development plan is the responsibility of the trustees, the managing agents, to keep copies of those so that it is easy to hand that to owners if they want to make changes to it. Nowadays, when everything is done electronically, it's also advisable for the managing agents and the trustees to keep copies of these things electronically, because it can make it much easier for owners eventually to submit building plans and site development plans, and not having to redraw all the plans every time. So basically what we're trying to advance is the fact that trustees, managing agent, the body corporate should always have the latest amended sectional title plans. They should have the PQs then change to fit into to what is on site, and you need to have all the documentation indicating exclusive use areas. And there's obviously different ways that these exclusive use areas can be registered, in either in the rules or by the land surveyor. Different costs, different purposes. We're not going to go into those details now. And then really this is the starting point of any request that there will be to trustees for additions or to a managing agent. If you don't know what the existing status of your complex is, it will be very difficult to give advice or to give approval to any or support any changes. So the first step would be for most complexes where additions have been done over years that was not recorded necessarily, or where there's just a free-for-all type of attitude, is to have a complex order done. And that will give you the existing situation whereby the existing building plans is compared with the existing sectional title plans, and where it is compared with what is on the property in the complex now. We do quite a bit of those audits, and it is quite scary to see how few complexes are compliant and how many units or sections in a complex is not compliant and needs attention. Either sectional title plans needs to be changed. Mostly building plans have to be submitted, and it's important to note that only after building plans have been approved, the surveyor, land surveyor, can survey the additions, because he must certify that all building plans and all rules and regulations are adhered to. So in a complex audit, basically, each unit is inspected and surveyed, and eventually a report is given to the body corporate stating the legal or situation. And over here we just have a very easy way of explaining why it is important that your sectional title plans needs to be updated. If you have 10 units, all of them is 100 square meters in size, you will notice that each one basically have a 10% share in the participation quota. So all of them will pay the same amount of levies, and with only one unit adding like 40 square meters, for instance, to their unit, immediately it will change the PQs of all the other units to 9.55, and that specific unit to 14%. So you can see the change that there will be in the levies paid by each section, and the increase, so the decrease for most and the increase for the person that have made the addition. And therefore it is legally the responsibility of trustees and the body corporate to make sure that they're legal. This is just a typical situation where we did a sectional title complex audit, and you'll see the red, for instance, is everything where building plans are required, and the green ones are areas that needs to be included in the PQ, for instance. So typically it's not strange if you have more than 60% of units that is not compliant. And it's a tedious process to follow, but it's important that for each and every edition, this is followed. If it wasn't done for years, it is important to have an audit done and try to fix as many as of these problems simultaneously. It is much cheaper for each individual owner, although it is the responsibility mostly of each owner to fix his building plans. It's much cheaper to have it done simultaneously, because without knowing what the existing coverage is, it is possible that none of those additions can be approved. It's often possible to apply for additional 10% of coverage, for instance, but not knowing what the existing coverage is means that it's impossible to really give it a second thought if one can allow more coverage. Just the last point that I think is important to note, and that is parking, where we have a tendency lately where people, owners, convert garages into living areas. In most cases, it is highly problematic, and in a lot of cases, it can never be legalized, purely because it will affect the parking requirements, and it will force the owner to park his vehicle on common property, and the common property is obviously there for other people to enjoy as well. So there is, I'm sure you're all aware of the High Court case where it was definitely spelled out that it is not legal to do it. And especially for the property practitioners, when you deal with a property where that have been done, it will be a misrepresentation to offer that to a buyer and just saying, yeah, you have a 3-bedroom now or 4-bedroom, because at some stage, most likely it will have to be returned to its original legal status of a garage. And of course, then the buyer will not have what he bought, and it can have consequences if there was misrepresentation involved in it. Okay, I think that is basically a very quick look at the processes that needs to be followed. There's much more details, but it depends a lot on the specific situation, and therefore it's not quite possible. You're welcome to send us a mail or have a discussion on specific issues. I'm not sure, Jenny, are there any questions? Let's quickly have a look at the questions and see if we can answer them.
A question, please. What is the process and implication for an owner to enclose their open balcony, which is already part of their section, with a glass enclosure? Can trustees alone give permission?
Okay. Given the fact that it's already part of the section, of course, there's no issue about ownership. But it is going to affect the visual appearance of the complex, and therefore it is important for a complex also to have, in cases like that, a standard procedure for to follow, and it should include, and it preferably should be in the rules, whereby the material is specified, and various other aspects to ensure that you have a visually pleasing complex whereby you have the same material. That would also, for instance, as far as maintenance is concerned, be standardized. You don't want one enclosed balcony with wooden frames, one with aluminium frames, one with steel. Firstly, it looks, the visuals are negatively affected, and as well, with maintenance, it will put additional strain on maintenance, because now you need one product for the wood, one product for aluminium, one product for steel, and therefore it's advised to have that put into your rules. And then, of course, it's in principle already approved by the body corporate, and then the trustees can just enforce that rules that's already in the rules of the complex.
Okay, I would like to know what is required for built-in braais in an exclusive use area, which is common property.
Okay, braais depends on the type of braai that you're talking about. If it's exclusive use area, obviously you already have the use of it, but you will have to ensure the safety of the complex. So if you put a chimney onto it, then of course you need building plans for it, and you need to take into consideration how it will affect your neighbor. For instance, if you are going to create a situation where your neighbor is negatively affected by the smoke, for instance, then of course it should not be supported. You anyhow need permission from the body corporate for any additions or any changes to be made. Exclusive use only mean that you have the use of it, you're not the owner of it, and you cannot do anything that can negatively affect your co-owners. So it will depend again on the type, where exactly it is. Is it directly underneath the window of your co-owner? So yeah, we'll need a bit more information to advise you on exactly, but the fact that it's common property, although exclusive use, does not give you the right to just go ahead and do any constructions or use it for anything that can negatively affect your co-owners.
Where do we get a zoning certificate from?
Okay. Zoning certificates are available from your local municipality. Each property in the country have a zoning certificate, and if you go to your local authority, they will issue you with a zoning certificate. Sometimes it's a one-pager, sometimes there will be an annexure, sometimes it will refer to certain conditions that will be in the town planning scheme. But if you go to your local municipality, they will be able to assist you. In Tshwane, we obtain documents for managing agents and property practitioners as well. But if you're in a different municipality, you will have to go to the municipality yourself.
At what stage during construction does the building inspector have to view?
Okay, depending on the type of structure, but the first place where the building inspector normally comes in is with the foundations. So once the foundations have been dug, you will get the building inspector, and he will look at a few things. He will firstly look at the width and the depth of the foundation, and that is before you pour the concrete. And he will look at the position of it. If you indicated you're going to add a room of 3 by 4, he will check that the walls will be 3 by 4, because often, once you have done the foundations, it looks so small, and you tell the builder, just move it a bit while we're at it, move it another meter, and obviously the building inspector will not approve of that if he comes out. So right in the beginning, the first time he comes out is at the point of foundations.
Valuations that are being done are picking up errors that owners have not attended to the amendment of sectional title plans. What is the process to follow to rectify?
Okay. To rectify it, technically you follow the process that we discussed today, and it will depend again, is it common property, is it part of the unit, do you need to get the permission from the body corporate, the 75% at the meeting, you need to submit building plans, you need to get the land surveyor. So it is this full spectrum that we have discussed, including changes to the site development plan. So each alteration will have to follow either a part of the process or the full process. And typically, we would advise that the complex do an audit and determine all of these problems simultaneously and have a plan to fix all of them. But yeah, it needs to be fixed. But to do each one, you can imagine every time there's a change, a new site development plan has to be submitted. So if one owner do it, he will do his carport. Then another owner will have to do a site development plan to add the Wendy. The other one will have to submit a site development plan to indicate the enclosed balcony or something like that. And that is, if you can't get the body corporate to cooperate or to have a process whereby an audit is done, then each owner legally must ensure that his unit is compliant.
How do we know that Section 28(9) is applicable?
Well, if it is in Tshwane and there's any extension of the section required, that will require it to be registered at the Surveyor General and at the Deeds Office, it will be required.
Swimming pools and exclusive use areas, council approval is essential. Is that correct?
Correct. All swimming pools always needs building plans. We must distinguish between the different type of plans. Building plans are required no matter if it's full title, sectional title, exclusive use, common property. For the structures, you need building plans. The sectional title plans and the exclusive use areas only have to do with ownership and who have the use of it. But all structures need building plans, no matter who's the owner of it, if it's common property. Yeah.
Where can we get more information and quotes for a complex audit to be done?
You are welcome. I think our information is on the screen, and Jenny will post our email address, or you can just go to our website, Multiprof Property Intelligence or Multiprof Development, and you can send us a mail with the information and we can give you one quote. There is, I think, a few companies that do these things. Yeah, but we can assist you with a quote for that.
There's a metal carport and a shade port require plans. We put on sectional title plans.
Yes. Yes, it needs both of them, metal as well as shade netting need plans, municipal plans, building plans. As far as making changes to the sectional title plans, typically those structures are better dealt with as exclusive use areas because it can have a very big impact on the PQs and therefore a big influence on the levies payable. And if you take, let's say you have a small unit section of 40 square meters, and you add a double carport and you need to include that in your section, it will double your levy. And that is not quite a true reflection of the cost that you will have for the body corporate as such. So therefore, it's advisable that carports and structures that does not physically form part of your unit. I mean, whenever you add a room or you enclosed a balcony or a patio, that becomes part of your unit, of the living areas. And that must always be included in your sectional title plan and in the PQ. But if it is like a Wendy or a carport or things like that, I personally don't advise that it's included in the PQ, but it's for the body corporate as well to be consistent. I think that's the most important thing. It should be in the rules. There should be policies whereby each owner is treated in the same manner. But as I said, including carports into sectional title plans can be counterproductive. It is possible for exclusive use areas to charge a fee for that. That would obviously be less than what it would be in your PQ. But in your rules, therefore, you also need to have a way of dealing with the maintenance of exclusive use areas. It can be allocated to the owner. Again, I'm not in favor of that purely because what do you do if it's not maintained? Or there must at least be in the rules a way of dealing with owners that don't upkeep structures in exclusive use areas.
Our managing agent is stating that trustees, that additions are permitted on common property as long as it's within the 10% quota. Is that correct?
No, definitely not. That is no. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not quite sure what it refers to. The 10% that we mentioned have to do with the fact if extension of more than 10% to any unit is done, the permission of all bondholders of other units must be obtained. But there is definitely nothing that you can make additions or extend units even by 1 square meter without complying to the building regulations and updating the sectional title plan.
What constitutes as an addition? For instance, can an open courtyard area be enclosed, roofing installed, etc., to be used as a storeroom? Will that affect the square meterage of the section?
That's there's obviously a few gray areas. Firstly, enclosing a courtyard is problematic to start off with. In the courtyard, normally you will find gullies and you will find windows from the kitchen that gives ventilation to the kitchen. Now, firstly, you're not allowed, according to the building regulations, to enclose a gully, because a gully has to do with ventilation of your sewage system. So you are not allowed to put a roof over a gully. So enclosing 100% enclosing a courtyard anyhow is not legal as the building regulations is concerned. Visually, it is often horrendous. It doesn't look good. It negatively affects the visual of the complex, and therefore it is affecting the value of your co-owners' units. So that is problematic, and therefore it is not advised. And you will obviously need to get permission. You will need to get permission from your co-owners, because it's common property, even though it's exclusive use. So, and it will increase the coverage of the whole complex. So the question is it possible to allow each and every owner of a unit to enclose his that area and still be within the legal limitations of your coverage? And often the answer of that is no. So it is a practice that I believe should not be encouraged. We need to understand that the difference between complex living and having a full title property is that you buy into the complex supposed to be knowing the limitations. If you need a bigger unit, you need to move to a bigger unit, either in the complex or somewhere else. The idea of a complex that it is designed for the purpose, and therefore the idea that additions is a standard practice is not really correct. And complexes are not designed for additions, especially when you start looking at courtyards, for instance. The purpose of a courtyard is to have a washing line out in the sun where you can hang your washing, for instance. It was never intended to add additional rooms by enclosing those areas. And therefore, once a complex starts with those type of additions, allowing them or closing eye, you often run into huge problems, and especially as far as the aesthetics of the complex is concerned. But as I said, there's also some implications of ventilation into the kitchen, for instance, or other rooms that don't have windows in other areas. You're not allowed to ventilate into a closed area. And the same even can be problematic in closing certain patios, or if there's no other windows to, let's say, the living room, and the only windows go into the patio, you cannot enclose the patio, because now that living room will ventilate into the patio that's enclosed, and therefore will not comply with the national building regulations.
We ran out of time, so let's do the last two.
Okay.
Can an owner be forced to remove non-compliant alterations, so after many years and new ownership? And what is the process, and who is responsible for the cost?
Yes, of course it can be done. There's various ways, but mostly those are done on common property. So technically it does not even belong to the owner. Important from my experience is to take the owners within this process, especially when you do the audits as well. You can understand, especially where people bought something and they were misled in a way on purpose or just by not being knowledgeable in it. But yeah, it is, there is various ways. First is obviously to request the owner to do that. And then you can also take the case to CISOS. And then the ultimate way is often, and it's not recommended as a first step, is to ask the building inspector to get involved. The building inspector will look at the plans, and anything that's not on the plan, and then the council will basically take over the role, take the owner to court, or at least give him a warning, or give him a time to fix it. And to fix it, he will need the approval from the body corporate. That obviously, if it's not, if you don't want that type of thing, it will not be given, and then he will be forced technically by the council to demolish it. Or council can also demolish it at his cost, but also the body corporate can do it at his cost, because it is common property and it does not comply with the rules and regulations of the complex. It is worthwhile to get proper legal support in the process, and often the problem is that there are so many illegal structures that the owner will just say, yeah, but what about that one? And what about the trustee? And what about the chairperson? And what about, and therefore it's important that you don't target a specific owner while other owners have worth contraventions in the complex.
Well done. I feel additions, extensions is favouring one owner should come at a price where such owner pays the body corporate for the extra space. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the concept of sectional title is that levies are determined by the size of your unit. So it is in line with the idea, with the concept of sectional title, that whenever you make an addition, you need to fit into the concept, purely because once the body corporate take over, they're also responsible for the maintenance of the bigger area. Of course, it will cost more to maintain a bigger section than a smaller section. So that is not negotiable. It's how the system works. So the bigger your unit, the more you pay. And therefore, it's important that all units are up to date and each and every owner pays his part of the cost of the complex, as it would be if you've bought a bigger unit from the beginning. Your levies would have been more. So if you made additions, you should also contribute more than somebody that have a smaller unit. Okay, I think that's about what we have time for today. So you're welcome to send us a mail, ask more questions, give opinions, and if we can assist with any of the things we discussed, you're welcome to just mail us and we can give you more information. And I hope that you've learned something. There is so much to know, and there's also some gray areas. So yeah, the more we talk about it and the more we learn about it, it can only be good for the sectional title industry in future. Unfortunately, over the last 30, 40 years, a lot of things gone wrong, and it is just perpetuated by not acting in line with the rules and regulations. From my side, that's all. Thank you for attending, and we will keep you posted if there's any more sessions on similar subjects. So thank you for joining us.